Citizens, America is back.
All that Donald Trump is doing is repeopling the swamp with his own monsters rather than the old ones.
And we will restore true democracy to America again.
It is a attempted takeover, if you like.
Hi, I'm Maddie, Hale, and welcome to the Trump Report. Today is a big day. We've had Donald Trump's joint Congress address. He went for an hour and 40 minutes, so there was so much to unpack there. So we spoke to Adam Boulton, a broadcaster and journalist and presenter on Times Radio, who's spoken to us about the best quotes from Donald Trump's speech. Is it true? Is it not? Did he lie? So much to unpack. So all that today on the Trump Report. We're going to get right into the speech and just dissect it all, so you can watch the Trump Report every day, Monday through Friday on Times Radio's YouTube.
6 weeks ago, I stood beneath the dome of this Capitol and proclaimed the dawn of the golden age of America.
Adam Boulton, a journalist, broadcaster and presenter at Times Radio. Thank you for joining the Trump Report today.
It's nice to be here. There's a lot to talk about.
Where to even begin? Actually, that is something I've said to my guest every single day this week, where to even begin, because the news is evolving every single day. But today, we've obviously had Donald Trump's, well, it's not a State of the Union address, but it's his first congressional address to both sides of the political aisle. It was a heated sometimes and fine the other times. But I want to start off with a quote that he said. He said it was stated many times that the first month of our presidency is the most successful in the history of our nation by many. What was your reaction to that quote?
Well, I think, the main thing about this speech is it wasn't the address of a president to joint Congress. It was really a continuation of Donald Trump's political rallies. And in that, we know that he uses extreme language, talks about himself as a genius, and, was talking about the golden age that he's going to deliver to the United States. So he wasn't really attempting, as people often do in these speeches, as you say, it wasn't the State of the Union because he hasn't been in power for a year, to lay out a legislative program, say what they're going to achieve, instead of which we got the bombastic, boastful Donald Trump that we've known all along, bigging up his own achievements, even if he hasn't achieved them yet. I mean, talking about, for example, building a golden dome over the United States to defend itself, bigger and better, of course, than the Iron Dome they've got in Israel. And because of that, in one sense, it wasn't a serious political speech because he only spoke to one side of the aisle. He demonstrated, if we needed more demonstration, just how polarized American politics is, with lots of cheering coming from Republicans and Democrats sitting there in stony silence, one of them thrown out for heckling, a lot of Democrats wearing pink as a kind of protest against the whole idea of Donald Trump. And of course, the heckle that came out from Al Green from Texas, who was eventually thrown out, was, "You don't have a mandate." Well, I think that part of the problem for the Democrats is that he does have a mandate. Not only did he win the election, but as he said himself, he won the popular vote by a considerable margin.
It was, as you said, my first reaction to watching the speech. I think I watched most of it, and it was a campaign speech. You're exactly right. He presented it as he was presenting any ordinary campaign rally. I mean, I guess Donald Trump doesn't really kind of change what's been working for him. But Adam, it was the longest historic speech to Congress, an hour and 40 minutes he spent up there. Now, it was, as you kind of mentioned in so many words, a bit of a me show from Donald Trump, as expected, as we would expect from Donald Trump, talking about accomplishments he made in his first term, talking about accomplishments he made in his first 6 weeks, and ones that he predicts he will make in the next 4 years. But what I thought was an interesting thought from just myself was, Adam, I didn't see an auto cue. I didn't even see his binder open. Is this all off the cuff?
I think pretty largely. I mean, he has made a phenomenon of these election rallies, so I think he knows what he wants to say. But he's certainly not reading from an auto cue in the traditional way in which these speeches are given. I think partly because he finds it very difficult to stay on auto cue. I mean, he did for his second inauguration address and his first inauguration address, he had a very clear script, which he did follow, even although some of the content of that was quite shocking. But on this occasion, he was riffing. I mean, one of the features that have become increasingly in these joint addresses to Congress is picking out people in the audience who've been invited specially to come along. And in this case, he was talking about a mother who'd lost a son who'd been run over by a drunken illegal immigrant, boy who had cancer, who wanted to be a policeman. Now, obviously, when he's telling those stories, it's not scripted. He knows what the story is, or he knows what his version of the story is, and he simply lets it go and responds emotionally. So he is, he has broken a lot of the rules. I think one of the reasons why Donald Trump has been so successful is that we got used to sanitized, cautious political presentation, everything scripted, nothing going out of beyond what was planned in advance. It's never like that with Trump, and I think that sort of spontaneity is one of the things that people respond to.
And to that end, I have created the brand new Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. Perhaps you've heard of it. Perhaps. Which is headed by Elon Musk, who is in the gallery tonight.
Adam, I want to get into a few key moments from the speech, a few key quotes that he said, and get your reaction to them. So here's one. He said, "We have ended weaponized government, whereas an example of a sitting president is allowed to viciously prosecute his political opponent like me. How did that work out? Not good."
Yeah, I mean, he actually accused the American legal system of having been taken over by radical left lunatics. Again, that is what he said throughout the period between leaving office and being re-elected, that it was all a politicized campaign against him. And, the thing about Trump is very often when he says something that this is, the judiciary has been politicized and used against him, it's very often a signal that that's exactly what he's going to try and do to his opponents. And we know that already he has fired senior judges, both in the federal system and also in the legal system of the United States military. And in both cases, that will give him, he suspects, much greater freedom. I mean, this is the man, remember, who said a long time ago, I could go out into Fifth Avenue and shoot someone and nothing would happen to me. And he is demonstrating by the fact that he is the first convicted felon to become president that he can defy the law.
It's almost like he's happy that it all happened because it shows that he does think he's invincible. Another quote, he says, "I've stopped all government censorship and brought back free speech in America." Now, this is an interesting one, Adam, because I don't know if you know that he's been attacking AP as of late, but him and his press team have also done a really unprecedented move by basically saying that they're in charge of which journalists get to be in the press pack.
Yeah, well, this is again an example of doublespeak. There's this great deal of talk about free speech, but it basically means Donald Trump and Elon Musk and their friends being able to say what they like, and as you say, suppressing other counter voices, if you like, and we've seen quite extraordinary changes in the White House press corps. For example, for that Zelensky meeting, neither Reuters nor AP, the international wire services, were given a place to stand in the Oval Office, whereas we had a lot of right-wing influencers, including the one who asked that push question about why Zelensky was showing disrespect by not wearing a suit. They have been invited in. And even, I mean, I don't know if you've worked in the White House. I've worked in the White House. It's quite a sort of formalized place where the various news organizations, according to their sort of seniority, have places where they workplaces, and the White House has said, no, sorry, New York Times, you've got to rotate out and you've got to let in some of these influencers sit in your office instead. So, the message is very clear. If you don't toe the line, even if you're saying you're doing non-partisan commentary on what's going on, that is not considered good enough. You will be punished or excluded.
They're very much into new media and bringing in those kind of smaller right-wing journalists, as you said, influencers, YouTubers. But another one, there was a big part of Donald Trump's speech was about Doge and Elon Musk, who had a bit of a standing ovation, I guess, only from Republicans. But when Trump was referring to Doge, he said, any federal bureaucrat who resists this change will be removed from office immediately because we are draining the swamp.
Well, draining the swamp, that's a familiar one. We've had that one for about 15 years now. Some people would say that all that Donald Trump is doing is repeopling the swamp with his own monsters rather than the old ones. But that is a line which is picked up by MAGA, Make America Great supporters around the country. And Donald Trump, in spite of being a billionaire, in spite of having almost all his cabinet being very rich people, if not billionaires themselves, he still insists that he is an outsider and that it's these elite in Washington, what he called the radical left, who dominated federal government, and he's sweeping them out. And he is sacking a lot of people, and Musk is sacking a lot of people, and incidentally, some of them people doing the sacking are now appointing themselves into the departments where they're clearing people out and taking salaries. It is a attempted takeover, if you like, and certainly what we've also seen is that in the traditional checks and balances of the American government, the separation of powers, the judiciary, the legislature, the Congress, and the presidency, Trump is pretty consistently setting about trying to weaken the influence of both of those. Now, of course, at the moment, he is powerful because Republicans are dominant in both houses of Congress. But, this speech, traditionally given by a president, he lays out a whole load of legislative achievements that he wants the Congress to work on over the coming year. None of that from Trump in the speech. He simply boasted about what he'd done and all the executive orders that we've seen him signing in the Oval Office. So he is basically saying to the American people, whether you like it or not, you've got a king now, an absolute monarch who is going to do things, and everyone else is frankly subordinate, including the other branches of government.
A few more when it comes to the US economy, which I have to say, Adam, I didn't feel like he made such huge emphasis on like I thought he would. But he said, and honestly, that could have been because the last 2 days markets have been in turmoil after the tariffs. But he said, by the way, we're going to have growth in the auto industry like nobody's ever seen. Plants are opening up all over the place. Deals are being made. That's a combination of the election win and tariffs. It's a beautiful word, isn't it? That along with our other policies will allow our auto industry to absolutely boom. It's going to boom. There's this huge emphasis from Trump on the car manufacturing industry.
Yeah, and also, as in the MAGA phrase, Make America Great Again, this sort of trying to take the credit before it's happened, if you like, saying we're going to have a great boom, we're going to make America great again, which is an upbeat message, which has proved successful with voters. I mean, as far as the car industry is concerned, that should perhaps be benefited, or at least theoretically it should be benefited by tariffs, fewer imports from the rest of the world, which, particularly Europe, of course, which, according to Donald Trump, as he said in his speech, has been ripping us off, and therefore domestic demand will buy American cars. And of course, Tesla's, Donald Trump's friends, Elon Musk's firm is trying to lead the market in electronic cars. And one of the reasons why Musk fell out with Biden was that he had not invited Musk to talk about cars at an electric vehicle summit in the White House. And so that flipped him to use his money to back Trump. So he is saying to people in Detroit and elsewhere, your industry's been declined, I'm going to make it better. A lot of economists, as you say, would disagree that tariffs are going to do that. And indeed, one of the things Donald Trump didn't do, one of the regular boasts which we didn't get, was about how well the stock market is doing. Because guess what? The stock market's not doing. It's fallen back to where it was when he became president. But again, one of his regular untruths was to say that he'd had a terrible economic inheritance from the Biden administration, and since then things have been reversed. Most independent analyses would actually say the inheritance he got, the state of the American economy, was quite strong at the time he took over. But this is, the new world. You would never see a world leader, let alone perhaps the most powerful leader, the American president, before, just telling straightforward statistical untruths. But this is how Trump operates. For example, he trotted out again his America spent $350 billion supporting Ukraine. There's absolutely no evidence for that. America has spent a great deal of money, but something like approaching 100 billion. But he just asserts these facts. And the point is, you do get then into the zone of alternative facts that, Americans turn it on, watch the speech, see clips on the news, see clips on social media of Trump saying things, and they believe them, even though they're untrue. So he's managed to completely change the terms of exchange, if you like, in terms of what's happening in the world and in the United States.
But Adam, Trump prides himself on being transparent. We can say what we want about him, but as journalists, we get to watch him affront the media a lot more than any other president. Definitely a lot more than the last few years with Joe Biden. So he says he's transparent. He says he's open to interviews. He's open to press conferences, which do include questions from reporters. But then he gets up and spins lies to the American people. Is that your interpretation?
Yeah, it's absolutely my interpretation. I mean, I think, we have to remember this is someone who rose to fame as the presenter of The Apprentice, the TV show, which basically consisted of lining people up and telling one of them they weren't good enough, and he was firing them. And he has done that. He's basically turned his presidency into a series of episodes of The Apprentice. And unfortunately for the Zelensky, he happened to find himself in one where, it looked like he was getting fired. And likewise, with this address to Congress, going on for 100 minutes, he was turning it into a television event, whereas normally the public might have thought, well, boring speech by the president. We'll look at it with one eye. He always puts himself second. It's about dramatizing himself. It's personalized. There isn't even a very strong ideology. But I think one of the changes that's really significant with this second presidency, the 47th presidency, as opposed to the previous one, the 45th presidency, is people always used to say, oh, well, Trump, he just talks and he doesn't act. What we're seeing in this time around is that he is acting. He has cut support to Ukraine. He has imposed tariffs. So it is not a case any longer that his bark is louder than his bite.
And there is kind of reason to believe, Adam, that the reason why he's so gung-ho and signing all these executive orders so early into his presidency is because he's well, I mean, in his world, he would love to run for a third term, but right now, law would state that he can't run, so he's got to get everything done within the 4 years, but his first term, he probably thought he was going to win a second term, so he'd have more time to get things done. So that's kind of one interpretation of why he's been so fast forward with the campaign promises he made. But just this last quote for you from the speech was, we're going to conquer the vast frontiers of science. We're going to lead humanity into space and plant the American flag on the planet Mars and even far beyond.
Yeah, well, I mean, he talked about Mars in his inauguration address as well in January. This is an ambition which appeals to sort of small boys or adolescent boys. And of course, it is one of the preoccupations of Elon Musk. And it was notable, for example, that probably the person who was most loudly commended by the president in the course of his speech was Elon Musk. I mean, people will have their own views about whether planting the flag on Mars is achievable by people or is a worthwhile achievement. But this, in a sense, is taking something out of the playbook of the most famous inauguration address by by John F. Kennedy in 1960 when he talked about the space program and the space race. And that, of course, was part of the period of American boom in technology, American innovation, which did lead to America getting the first men on the moon. So one can see, if you like, one thread of continuity in what Donald Trump was talking about there.
Take your seat. Finding that members continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber.
One of the more scandalous things, Adam, we mentioned earlier in the interview is Democratic Congressman Al Green being escorted out early into the address, very early, a few minutes in after he was, I guess, protesting in the chambers. But we saw that. But then on the other hand, I've seen online commenters think the Democrats should have walked out when Donald Trump started attacking the party. One would say that it would make it look quite hilarious if Democrats had left and it would look empty. What are your thoughts when it comes to the fact that Donald Trump, he really did attack Democrats? He mentioned Joe Biden 12 times, said he was the worst president in American history, and continued to attack them as radical left lunatics. Should they have walked out, or do Democrats just need to take this on the chin when it comes to these addresses?
Well, it really depends on how you approach politics. I mean, traditionally, the US Congress is much more consensual than the British Parliament, for example. In the British Parliament, you've got an opposition facing a government, whereas it is a semicircle in both houses of Congress. And, traditionally, we've seen, often pretty conservative by the standards of Europeans, the two sides working together. What is happening now, and I think the one big message which everyone should take from the speech last night, is that American politics is now dramatically polarized, that Trump is only interested in his people who, in electoral terms, are pretty close to majority, and that the other half of the country simply don't have anything to say to him. But the political problem in the United States is, whereas we in this country and most other countries, you have an opposition, a leader of the opposition who's seen as the kind of second political voice in the country, America doesn't have that system. That the opposition, if it's there, would come from members of Congress. But when you've got the Republicans in the majority, there is actually no direct platform for the opposition party to confront the president. And certainly, I think we're still seeing the Democrats instinctively wanting to play a sort of consensual politics, to do the right thing, to sit there and listen to the president, even if they disagree with him. I mean, Nancy Pelosi, for example, was in the chamber muttering, "That's not true," at various points. But that is sort of traditional politics. Trump is just, has just succeeded in absolutely trashing that in a kind of, and turning it into a divided nation, while claiming, of course, that he's the great unifier and everyone agrees with him. And it's true. I mean, there is massive debate within the Democratic Party, elected Democratic politicians, about how they're going to confront this, and they are looking for a leader. I mean, if it was, if this was Britain, even although Kamala Harris had been defeated, by now she would either be still there criticising the government, or she would have been replaced by someone who fulfilled that role, instead of which, she's just disappeared. And Trump is able to dominate the airwaves. I mean, we should say, if we were actually looking for news lines in this beyond propaganda and boasts, possibly the fact that he appears to be moving closer towards some sort of reconciliation with Zelensky, following Zelensky's letter apologizing and thanking America and saying that a minerals deal was on, that perhaps was a positive. but, mixed in with the most extraordinary stuff. For example, talking about Robert F. Kennedy, the health secretary and vaccine denier, just saying almost en passant, oh yeah, he's going to conquer autism. There won't be autism in America because Robert F. Kennedy's been appointed health secretary. I mean, it's a bizarre world.
Earlier today, I received an important letter from President Zelensky of Ukraine. The letter reads, Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible.
Trump signaled that there would be a reset in relations between the US and Ukraine, saying Zelensky is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace. He said he appreciates the letter that Zelensky wrote him. He wrote a similar letter on X, but then a private letter to Donald Trump. But he also said that he did speak to Putin the day before, who's also ready for peace. So do you think that we're kind of getting headway here, that we will get a peace deal brokered soon?
Well, it is certainly true that Trump's arrival and his determination, I mean, remember he said he was going to sort this out on day one, and we're now, 60-something days into his administration. He hasn't even started the peace talks. It's certainly true that he has managed to shift the focus. I think, partly because his egomania and his belief that he can be a peacemaker, so that both Russia and Ukraine are beginning to think about the options for peace talks. I mean, Zelensky said he wanted peace talks. The problem is that the way Trump started seemed to lean so heavily towards Russia that it was very difficult for Zelensky to engage with that. And now we appear to have quite an extraordinary situation where effectively America is cheering on Trump, and Trump is cheering on the Russians, and the Russians are cheering on him, whereas we've got the Europeans and Canada being very, actually emphasizing and increasing their closeness towards Ukraine and Zelensky. So we seem to have two blocks preparing for a negotiation. Now, the problem with that is Trump wants to see himself as an honest broker, but he already seems to have taken sides. So there does seem to be quite a lot of confrontation. But, to give him his due, he has put the idea of ending this war on the agenda in a way it wasn't before he got into the White House.
Exactly right, Adam. And even though it was a very, unprecedented way of getting this done, he did pressure the EU and the UK to step up their military and defence spending, which needed to happen regardless, and there needs to be less reliance on the US when it comes to, will they be there when all hell breaks loose? But I thought it was kind of bizarre that Trump didn't really mention cutting off military aid to Ukraine.
No, he didn't. And this is the thing about Trump. You don't quite know how long he's going to stick with his various ploys and to what extent he would say that it's part of the art of the deal that you leave people uncertain. But as things stand, they are intending cutting off aid, and until Zelensky signs that deal, we won't know whether it's going to be reinstated. Because at root, from the perspective of Ukraine and the other members of NATO, the key issue, the thing which, the President of France, the British Prime Minister and Zelensky were trying to do was to connect America, to get a commitment from the Americans, from Trump, that in the ultimate they would be a backstop if the Russians attacked. And the simple truth is that would have been automatic for any previous president, but Trump still has not committed to that. If you read the small print or between the lines of what he's saying, so there's going to be a continued pursuit of that. For example, yesterday the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he thinks it's over because his country, that's always been a close ally of America, is now facing tariffs. He doesn't think you can trust Trump. Others, like Sir Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, are trying to hold out hope against hope that actually things will get a bit more normal as far as the position of the United States towards Ukraine and the rest of the world. But there isn't any evidence of that yet. And indeed, in the speech, reiteration that one way or another, America's going to take over Panama, they're going to take over, in the interests of the world, we're told, they're going to take over Greenland, And, in his social media posts, the Prime Minister of Canada is still referred to as the Governor of Canada by Trump. So he does seem pretty determined in his kind of bullying geostrategic refix to make America great again.
Adam, I want to actually get into comments about Greenland, but before we get into that, I do want your thoughts on JD Vance's role as the vice president. Now, he's been quite controversial. He had a very controversial speech at the Munich Security Conference, which really kicked off his role as the vice president. He then basically acted as Trump's attack dog at the Oval Office last Friday, and then he made or alluded to very disrespectful comments towards British and French troops when he said that they hadn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years, which is obviously incorrect because British troops had obviously fought and died in Iraq and Afghanistan. We know that the relationship between the US, EU and the UK is quite frazzled right now. Do you think that JD Vance should apologise, like certain veterans have called for him to do so?
Well, he did try and row back on those remarks, where he said, some random country that hasn't fought for 40 years, which seemed to be a reference to either the UK or France, because they're the only ones who have offered to put troops into a peacekeeping force in Ukraine. He did try and row back and said it's a lie, his comments are being distorted. So I think that's the closest you're going to get to an apology, attacking the people who have picked up on those remarks. You'll see from the British newspapers this morning, he's being denounced, I think called a dunce, is it, on the front of the Sun. He's become a hate figure, and he wants to become a hate figure because what he wants to do is to appeal to the MAGA base as the man who says even more unsayable truths than Donald Trump, because he clearly wants to run for the presidency and be elected after Donald Trump. Now, you alluded earlier on to the fact that constitutionally Donald Trump is not eligible to run again. If all goes rosy for this administration, I'm pretty sure he will attempt to get Congress to reverse the amendment, the 23rd Amendment, I think it is, that limits a president to 2 terms. I don't think things are going to get rosy, and I don't think he'll ever get a majority. So that would mean that Vance will really want to be seen as his heir apparent. The interesting thing is, when asked by friendly journalists if JD Vance was his nominated successor, Trump is not giving him the nod yet. He ducked that one and said there are a lot of good people in his administration.
Oh, Adam, unsurprising there. Donald Trump would never be giving JD Vance the limelight for 2028 when it's his term right now. I think he likes to keep his cabinet members at an arm's length, boost them up when they need, but then take them down immediately. A bit of a tall poppy syndrome from Donald Trump. He needs to be the man in power.
And I also have a message tonight for the incredible people of Greenland. We strongly support your right to determine your own future. And if you choose, we welcome you into the United States of America. We need Greenland for national security and even international security, and we're working with everybody involved to try and get it.
I want to get back into these Greenland comments. He said he offered Greenland the opportunity to become a part of the United States. It's needed for international world security. And he says, I think we're going to get it one way or another. We'll keep you safe and take Greenland to new heights, which prompted a single boo from a Democrat member in the audience. But what did you make of those comments? He will get it one way or another.
Well, I mean, when he initially made these comments, people thought he was joking. But it has now become apparent that he does have a vision of spheres of influence, and basically he thinks that the US government should run North America, and that means making these remarks about incorporating Canada into the United States, and Greenland is part of the continental mass of North America, so that in that sense there's a claim for it. He, I think, would argue that, geostrategically, because of increased navigability of the Arctic, that it's very important that others, notably Russia and China don't steal a march in that area. But I mean, the point about all this is that it is throwing everything up in the air. The common assumption that, borders would be respected, the post-Second World War settlement in which America was in the driving seat, he is now opening the way to the idea of territorial adventurism. That's the truth of what he's saying about the settlement in Ukraine. He's saying, yeah, it'd be fine for Russia as the bigger nation to take a bit of Ukraine. He's saying equally, why shouldn't America buy, he says in the first instance, but he's also hinted at times that it could be militarily. I mean, there are more American troops in Greenland at the moment than anything else.
I mean, Adam, isn't this exactly what Putin did?
Yeah, it is. I mean, a cynical interpretation of Trump is that he's trying to turn himself into a king, and basically he wants to go back to 400 years where there were empires ruled over by kings, Putin here, Xi in China, and him, and all the little people don't really matter. They just have to fall in line and occasionally be fought over by the big guys. I mean, that is Trump's vision of the world. It's pretty depressing.
And it's dictatorial. But I spoke to a journalist yesterday who said Trump is a dictator, and he knows that, and he wants it, and he wants to be a king. So it's interesting, Adam, because usually in society we take about 100 years to repeat history, but he hasn't even gotten 3 years before he wants to repeat Putin's big war on Ukraine. But just a final question for you, Adam. I just want to wrap up with 3 words from you just to describe Trump's speech. How would you wrap this up in 3 words?
I would wrap it up as boastful, imperial, and divisive.
Perfect. Adam Boulton, thank you for joining the Trump Report today.
My pleasure. Thank you.